Jamie.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. I don't know whether it was a good idea sitting next to Peter, but anyway, welcome everybody. Simon asked me to come along tonight to provide a Māori cultural perspective on the issue of nanotechnology. I just wanted to provide a little bit more background as to the sort of work I do, just to give you a sense of where I'm coming from. I am a eco-toxicologist, as Kim pointed out, which is broadly is the field of study the fate and impact of man-made chemicals on the environment and environmental processes. So through that work and also through my other associations with organisations like IRMA, I've been really fortunate enough to actually work collaboratively with a lot of Māori organisations and communities around New Zealand on the issue of, broadly, of environmental quality and more specifically around water quality, but also around the work of hazardous substances, which I think nanotechnology could be sort of termed and put into. So essentially, to provide a Māori view, I guess it's a caveat here at the beginning, this isn't the New Zealand Māori worldview on nanotechnology. It's really just my interpretation of some of the conversations and dialogues that I've had with other Māori communities around the country. Essentially, there isn't a Māori view on nanotechnology. Why, you might be asking, and it's probably the same reason why you're here tonight. There's no information on nanotechnologies in our Māori community, or very little. I did a very unscientific survey this afternoon when I should have been working at Landcare. I got on the phone and rang some of my friends, and I rang about 20 people, and I asked them one of two questions. What is nanotechnology? I had some very interesting answers. Most of them were, I don't know, I have no idea. Isn't that a PlayStation game? So, yeah, but I mean, that's the sum total. I mean, it wasn't very representative, you might call it, but it was a snapshot. It was a quick snapshot. And I think that is reflective in my journeys around the country. And so it is a hard question to answer, what is the Māori perspective on nanotechnology. I think if you look at the word technology, and certainly some of the experiences we've been through with GM, Māori are very wary of technology. They certainly aren't against advancement of technology. In fact, they do see in instances where Māori have been privy to discussing nanotechnology, and IRMA ran a wānanga or a workshop about in 2008, specifically looking at what was called tikanga and technology, a new net goes fishing. So they were exposed to both genetic modification, but also nanotechnology. They had a whole day on it where scientists came in and talked about nanotechnology. So the people at that hui got a sense of what it was and could see the immediate benefits, both in terms of human health, both in terms of environmental quality, communications, energy, the whole lot. But there was also a sense of caution. The scientists at that, who I believe, I wasn't there in person, but I heard that they also talked about information gaps. Whilst the positive aspects of nanotechnology were being promoted, the scientists at that meeting did talk about there's also a lot of information gaps, and that made a number of the Māori participants at that hui, I guess wary. But there's another interesting, I talked to an elderly woman at that hui, or who went to that hui, and she had a very interesting view on it. She says, we don't care what the research says about nanotechnology. Her concerns were around things like who's monitoring it, who's regulating it, who's measuring it, wealth, where does the wealth go from this sort of technology? So it was sort of quite an interesting, I mean, I'm a research scientist, so I do research, but she was saying, park the research to the side for a minute. There's some more fundamental issues that as Māori they are concerned about, which might well be shared with the wider community.
Is it fair to say that one of the similarities between the arguments about genetic modification and the potential arguments about nanotechnology is the fear that there will be big money involved in this, and where there's big money, society might end up somewhere it hasn't thought through or doesn't want to be? Is that the suspicion?
That's one of them. I think another one is it is big money, although Hans might have another view on that. But particularly, it is an expanding area of research. So it is potentially, there's obviously some big financial gains to be made. They just don't want to be on the other end of, say, a poor decision. Technology goes ahead, some type of consequence to that. And it's probably not going to be they might go broke in the process, but potentially the industry may not be the wearer of that effect. It could be communities. So again, they're very sort of wary of that particular predicament.
Thank you. Georgia, sorry to keep you waiting for so long.
Thanks. I'm sure we're all going to get back to discussing the regulatory ins and outs, so I'm going to leave a couple of quibbles with what Peter said till we get to that discussion. Because what I actually wanted to talk with you about is some of the really striking contradictions and uncertainties that are inherent in the promise of nanotechnology, and then what Friends of the Earth, the group that I work for, is suggesting that we might do about it. Nano is a bit of an elusive technology or suite of technologies. It changes depending on how you hold it up to the light and who you're talking to and who they think that you represent. So sometimes when we hear promises from proponents trying to win hearts and minds or just simply research funding, we hear that it's a revolutionary technology, a technology that's going to reshape our world from the atom up, that's going to completely change the way that we grow food, produce energy, conduct medicine, everything. You name it, it's going to change it, absolutely. But then when we start thinking about, okay, well, what sort of oversight does such a powerful new technology require? We hear, oh, well, actually, it's actually a very familiar technology. We've been using it for years. In fact, if you look at the art glass produced by the Egyptians, you can find nanoparticles in it. There's really nothing to worry about here. And sometimes we hear that, in fact, it doesn't exist at all, that it's simply an extension of existing fields of scientific work. Similarly, we hear that it's an inevitable development, it's progress. All the Fortune 500 companies are doing it, governments around the world are investing in it, it's inevitable. And then when we stop and say, well, if it's inevitable, then let's start working to try to make sure that we direct it in a way that the community feels comfortable with, that we've got good oversight of safety, we hear that it's very vulnerable. And actually, we shouldn't bring in burdensome new regulation in case we scare the industry off and they all deport and go to China or somewhere that there are laxer regulations. We hear promises on the one hand that nanotechnology is altruistic technology, that what's driving it is a quest for clean, new, green energy or medicine for millions of people who don't currently have access to medicine. But when we actually look at the products that we got, it's all odour repellent socks and junk cosmetics. When we stop for a moment to actually audit where the products are, like a committee under the US president did last year, we found that only 1% of the products on the market actually have energy or environmental applications. Most of it's consumer products for affluent people in the global north. And then another contradiction, is it widespread? Is it everywhere? Is it in everything? Or is it simply emergent? Is there no need to worry just now because in fact it's not being used at all? These contradictions are inherent in so many of the nano debates and so many of the discussions that sometimes it's hard to get a grip on it.
Yes. In order to say that this is something just for fat, rich white people, in order to make us say that's terrible, there has to be evidence of harm, all right? Is there evidence of harm?
Well, I think there's two answers to that question. I mean, the first is evidence of harm for who? And if we're talking about...
any evidence of harm.
Yeah, but I think there's two things. Firstly, we've got the director of the Nano Safety Program for Australia's National Science Agency, the CSIRO, warning that in a worst-case scenario, using nano sunscreens could increase the risk of cancer. So although there's uncertainty, there's certainly high-level concern that the products that are on the market right now may not actually be serving their stated purpose.
Do you know how they could increase the risk of cancer?
Because a lot of them are photoactive. At the moment, there's no oversight that screens out the bad ones. Some of the titanium dioxide particles in particular produce a lot of free radicals when exposed to light. And those free radicals can damage DNA. In the long run, that can cause cancer.
All right.
So there's a real concern about that. But I mean, I think one of the bigger questions is if we've got billions and billions of dollars invested in this industry worldwide, partly on the basis that this technology is going to deliver for people and the environment, that it's going to deliver medicine, that it's going to deliver clean green energy, then I think we actually need to interrogate those claims. Because there's a lot of perfectly good research, perfectly good medicines that exist already that could be getting that funding were it not for the stars in the eyes when we look at nano. And I think we do need to ask, do we need, for example, a whole lot more very expensive research in fields like diagnostic tools? Is that what's
You're talking about Hansen's TB and HIV?
Yeah, which are exciting and promising, new developments. But is that actually most likely to benefit the people who most have need of immediate health care? We know that the majority of the world's people who are living in quite desperate situations, who die of treatable disease already. And a lot of those medicines have been around for a long time. It's not that they're cutting edge new things like HIV treatment. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is we're facing a whole bunch of quite complex social and economic related problems when it comes to poverty, when it comes to disease. And we do need to really question whether nanotechnology or any other new technology is really the silver bullet solution.
Is it fear of the new that you're expressing?
It's not just fear of the new, it's a fear that sometimes new technologies, particularly the very expensive new technologies that aren't able to be owned and operated and maintained in a community, when introduced into communities that are already having problems, can actually do more harm than good. I mean, the classic example of that being GMOs. We've got a situation where GMOs are pushed by philanthropic bodies, pushed by the US government into Africa. I was in Africa during the last couple of weeks at the World Social Forum, and we heard community after community talking about their efforts to resist this technology because it actually undercuts their capacity to do what they've always done, which is to grow and save their seed.
That's a different thing, though.
Yes.
That's a political and economic issue. When it comes to nanotechnology, as I understand it, you're talking specifically about a health issue.
No, actually, and I think this is the mistake that we all too often make in thinking that the only issue with new technologies is their health and safety. Because I would suggest actually that in a whole bunch of situations, nanotechnology represents one alternative to respond to some of the challenges that we've got, whereas we have other alternatives. And whether it's about agriculture or whether it's about energy production, we need to make sure we look at all of the alternatives because technology is not neutral. It does come with social and economic implications. If we choose one technology and one group can own and maintain it, everyone else can't own and maintain it, then that's actually a political act. And particularly with poor communities, it's very important to make the right decisions. But I would argue also with our own. Often there's a simple solution rather than a high-tech solution. For example, in a lot of Australian cities, the rain falls near the coast, not always in the water reservoirs. It would make a lot of sense, you would think, to supply everyone with a rainwater tank. Rain falls on houses, collects in the rainwater tank, can be used for a range of things. But instead we've got a fascination with big new dam projects. So it's just one illustration of a decentralised versus a centralised solution, and often with technologies, it's the centralised solution that gets promoted rather than something which can be accessed and maintained by local communities, and that's political.
It's all right.